right, so new Tau Codex is here. It has been for a little while too. And I thought I would talk in general about how I feel about the whole thing. I won't be going into specifics, although I will be providing examples from the book, but I won't say, for example, be going through all the stratagems that there are in the book. I may make separate videos for each of those things: stratagems, warlord traits, units, all the different stuff that can be found in the book in more specific detail for making videos for things that need to have their own dedicated video. For now, though, I would like to just talk about how I feel about the book in general, rules wise and all. I'm not going to dip into the lore or anything like that because it's not something I know that much about. I know a little bit, but I'm not going to talk about it. Just in general, I've been away from YouTube, from 40K for a while actually. Mostly because of the change in editions and a bit of frustration with the constant release of books that had started a couple years ago going into 9th edition. Where that really started was when I had to get a second Space Marine Codex for 8th edition, and then the following year, I remember getting it in the summer, and then the following summer, 9th edition happened, and a new Space Marine Codex was already out. And for me, that was a big dropping point for the game because it's $60 each time I need to get a new codex, and that's just ridiculous. Anyhow, it kind of pushed me out of love with the hobby a little bit, and the game as well. And recently, I'd gotten back into it. I managed to find ways to play and do things without necessarily buying all the books and buying all the stuff. But I did get myself a copy of the Tau Codex. So I got this the day it came out, so that would be about a week and a half ago, last Saturday. Picked it up. I've had a chance to play a few games as well, watch some battle reports, watch some other reviews of it, and kind of gave myself the time to come up with how I feel about the Codex on the whole. I didn't want to just look through the book and say it's good or it's bad. I wanted to take the time, play some games with it, see how certain rules interacted with each other, see what units I enjoyed playing with, and I'm still also kind of in the test play phase as well. I want to test everything out, and knowing too, just in general, that if, say, for example, a particular unit does not perform well or performs incredibly well in one game, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad unit or a good unit. You kind of have to take it within your play style, take it within the context of the game. How did the game go? I mean, you can't call it a crappy unit if, let's say you get second turn and someone blows it off the table right away. It's like you didn't get to use it. So that sucks. So just to kind of put my thoughts together about the book on the whole, as far as rules and strategies and units and everything, the whole book, rules-wise, I really enjoy. On the whole, I really, really like it, and I think it's there are a lot of spots where they nicely clean up a lot of rules that make it a lot more fun for Tau players to play, and a little bit more bearable to play against. Not to say easier to play against, but more bearable to play against if you are not the Tau. As an example, drones have been refined a little bit. Drones are now part of whichever unit you take them in. You can also take a dedicated unit of drones. but those drones can't simply tank wounds for anything that's nearby anymore, which I think is, it's less of a headache for your opponent. It's more clear cut for you. And there are some serious advantages to having the drones just as part of a unit. So as an example, if I had a Riptide that had its 2 shielded missile drones with it, when my opponent targets the Riptide unit, that is the Riptide and drones together as one unit, when that is targeted as a unit, when the wound roll happens, they are targeting the toughness 7 of the Riptide model, regardless of whether it's outnumbered by the 2 drones that have toughness 4. So there are big advantages here. And this is going to be interesting for things like big units of crisis suits with a ton of drones. It means when targeting that unit, the toughness of the drones is effectively ignored. So it's a toughness 5 squad for the crisis suits. It's a toughness 7 squad for the Riptide, as an example. And that just makes it easier. A little easier, and it's better for you as a Tau player. It just makes it, it's less things to kind of think over. And that's what I'm seeing a trend of within the Codex as well. Although there are bits where a lot of things got cleaned up and then further things got added. So I think more things, though, overall got cleaned up that make it a lot easier. Marker lights, as another example, got super cleaned up. There's no table anymore of different marker light effects based on how many marker lights you have on a set unit. It's just you essentially fire your marker lights at whichever targets. However many marker lights hit, you get that many marker light tokens on that unit. And whenever one of the units from your army fires weapons at a marker lit unit, you remove one of those tokens. So let's go with an example. Let's say you get 3 marker light tokens on an enemy unit. So one of your units, let's say it's crisis suits, decide to target that unit. You fire the weapons in that crisis suit unit and you remove a marker light token from the target, assuming it's still alive, of course. If the unit dies, then all those marker lights just go away. But you killed the unit, so who cares, right? So the crisis suit unit has fired all of their weapons. We've removed a marker light token. There are 2 remaining. Then we have another unit. Let's say it's a broadside from downtown. Fires some shots, targets the unit. Once it's finished all its shots, we remove another marker light token. There is 1 remaining. Then at the end of the phase, the shooting phase, whatever marker lights remain are gone right at the end. So nice and simple. And what that marker light gives you when you fire at it is it gives you +1 to your ballistic skill. So for any of the units that use one of those marker light tokens, it gives them +1 to their ballistic skill. A good bonus, a simple bonus, easy for you to remember, and it's also something to, the simplification is really going to help people who play against the Tau as well, that's why I think this is really a good thing, because it's good for Tau players and it's good for any players who play against them. Marker lights is going to be a simple thing to remember for everybody. Same as drones. It's nice and easy. They're part of this unit. They're part of that unit. They're part of that unit, and so on. Other advantages, actually, too, coming back to drones, is I had mentioned the toughness of the unit is basically taken on the toughness of whatever other models are in the unit. Unless, of course, it's a model of just drones, in which case, well, you're using the toughness 4 of the drones. But they're also ignored, drones are, for the purposes of morale when you remove models, which is nice as well. So, for example, if you had that same unit of crisis suits and you had 6 drones in that unit. Let's say your opponent kills all 6 of those drones. Whatever, no problem. I mean, you lose 6 drones. That's rough. But your opponent had to wound you on 5s, or rather wound toughness 5 because of the crisis suits being toughness 5. And then those drones get killed, and there's no morale problems because drones are just simply ignored for morale. So another nice cleanup, less bookkeeping, less counting. I'm all for anything that makes a turn go faster. I'm all for removing obscurity from rules to make things easier to understand for everybody, for make things quicker to go through. I like that in any game, and it's less of those like weird nuanced moments where you're like, well, actually this happens and then this happens and then this happens and your opponent's confused and then there's a rules argument. I mean, those are always going to be there, but the more you remove, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Let's talk about septs. So septs are effectively the chapters, the factions, the divisions, the whatever you want to call them, the particular armies within the Tau Codex. So, for example, we've got Tau Sept, we've got Vyor La, we've got Borkan, and a few others. They are Tau armies that will work slightly differently. So they follow all the same rules for the units and for marker lights and for drones. All the army-wide rules are all the same. But each of those factions will gain their own little bit of special rules. And overall, for the ones in this book, I think there are some very, very good ones. And I think a lot of it is going to come down to your play style. So I see a few where I think, yeah, it's all right. It's not my play style. So it doesn't work. So I'm not going to call it bad because I can see a lot of scenarios with a lot of different units where it can totally work. There's a little bit of an issue I have, though. So you have these set septs. That one's going to be tough. There are 6 in this book. You've got Tau, Vyor La, Sasia, Dalith, Borkan, and the Farsight Enclaves. These are the ones that are already established by Games Workshop, the factions that have already been set up. And they've been given sept tenets. These are the special rules specifically for your faction. So, as an example, Tau, each time a unit with this tenet is selected to shoot or fight, you can re-roll 1 hit roll or 1 wound roll when resolving that unit's attacks. So that's part of it. The other part is that you add 3 inches to any aura abilities. So those 2 rules together, that is your set tenet. So that is what your army now gets as a Tau faction, a Tau sept army. So you've got 6 like that. There's, like I said, Tau, Vyor La, etc. They also have their own unique warlord trait for each of those 6, their own unique relic. These are called signature systems. So it's a special piece of equipment for that particular sept, and their own particular stratagem. So right out of the gate, these 6 will have an advantage over creating a custom sept because you gain access to an extra warlord trait, an extra relic, and an extra stratagem that you would not otherwise if you were customizing your sept. That on its own is not really a huge deal. Although some of the, I will say some of the particular stratagems, at least in particular, I said particular twice, didn't I? Anyhow, some of these sept stratagems, sept-specific stratagems, are very good. Very, very good. So those are important to consider. I'm not saying they are change your whole damn army good, but they're very much worth considering when looking at what you're building. So there is a section, as I had mentioned, about custom sets. And I love this idea because it allows you to be creative with how your army operates. These are effectively tactical philosophies. They are bonuses, or they are things that your army is good at doing, something they're particularly good at doing. And I've always loved that about the hobby, when you're able to customize your army. So in recent years, Games Workshop has, with most of the codexes so far, has created a system where you can make your own faction by choosing two sept tenant qualities, or what's the best word for this? Yeah, sept tenant attributes to define your army, which is very cool. They've added this weird system to create them that I think is just a little bit more bookkeeping and weirdly set off. So to give you guys an example, there's this whole star chart here with sector A, B, C, D, and so on. And with that, you are given the option to take from certain sectors in that star map, but only if they're connected, only if they're contiguous, which is a weird limit, I think. Unless they had found some that were like broken together, but I really don't think so, based on the power of a lot of these, which is relatively low. I don't think this didn't need to be like this. This didn't need to be this complex. It's one of those things, when I spoke before about a lot of simplifications that are good, but then they added a few things that added further kind of stuff you got to keep track of. I think this is one of the things that could kind of go. And honestly, there are a lot here to choose from, and I love options, but a lot of these feel really like, a lot of them feel added in because they needed more things. So I don't know. There's a lot of these that I could leave out, and I wouldn't be dissatisfied that I have fewer options to choose from for custom seps. A lot of them are really not that good because they are hyper specific. There are like 4 or 5 checkboxes you need to meet before this part of your sept tenant works. And that to me is a little frustrating because it's game dependent, it's objective dependent, it's dependent on what your opponent does, it's dependent on where you're able to move, and I'm never a fan of rules or abilities that kind of force you into playing a certain way. I really like the idea of being a lot more open and being able to adapt to how the battle is played out. Because otherwise, if I have these rules, these hyper-specific rules, I feel like I have to do those things in order to gain the advantages that they give me, and kind of bend over backwards to do that. Let me give you a few examples. So a few of these are quite good, actually. A good example is one called Turbojets, and it adds 2 inches to the move characteristic of models with this tenant that can fly. A lot of things can fly in this codex. So while it may specify things that can fly and not everything, there's a lot that can fly. Virtually all your battle suits can fly, with the exception of the broadside. So all of those, all of your drones fly. The ethereal can get a hover drone and fly as well. Commanders are in battle suits, they can fly. All the tanks can fly. Piranhas can fly. Tons of things can fly in this book. So this one I really like. 2 inches to the move characteristic, and in a lot of cases in this codex, more range has already been added just from the codex update alone. So this is a big one. And so you would take that 2 inches move for things that fly and something else, and you would make your own custom faction. That one, Turbojets, is, in my opinion anyways, one of the good ones. I think it's really, really good. It's very versatile. It just gives you more move wherever you want to move. You want to move closer to the enemy, farther from the enemy, in and out of things, however you want to do it, it's yours to choose. Then you have some that are a little more particular. So let's see here. I'm trying to find a particular example of this that is... Yeah, okay, here we go. Camouflage Experts. This is from Sector B. Each time a ranged attack, so that's one checkbox, it's got to be a ranged attack, is made against an infantry, there's another checkbox, it's got to be infantry, unit from this tenant that is entirely on or within terrain feature, there's another checkbox. If the attacker is more than 12 inches away, that's checkbox number 4, then this unit, then the unit with this tenant is treated as receiving the benefits of dense cover against that attack. So dense cover would be the -1 to hit, which is good, but all of those things have to get checked off before that happens, which is, got to be a ranged attack, of course, to get dense cover. It's got to be infantry. Now, a lot of things have been given the infantry keyword as well in this book, including crisis suits, stealth suits, and broadsides. It's got to be already within, entirely within or on a terrain feature, and the attacker has to be more than 12 inches away. So all of those parameters need to be met before you gain this. And this, when I see something like this, basically, I feel like my play style is being forced to be far away from the enemy and in cover and taking majority infantry. That's what I don't like about it. And it's just too many checkboxes to get a bonus. -1 to hit is very cool. Now the thing is, there are units in the Codex that already get that, and you can't stack those. So that's out of the question. Ghost Keels, no. Stealth Suits, no. You're not going to get any stacking for that. So it's even more refined now, where these things are just getting kind of boiled out. I understand how stacking works. If there's a +1 and you have 2 -1s, you get the 1 -1. Sure, it's just too much to kind of think about for a bonus. It really kind of forces you to play a certain way, which I'm not a fan of. Now there are some good ones, and there are some good combinations that you can make. And a lot of it is really going to depend on your play style and your army composition. So the ones that I particularly enjoy might be different from the ones that you think are good. The issue I have, though, is that a lot of these, when put together, are less powerful than the already established factions, Tau, Borcan, Farside Enclaves, etc. Those ones are already more powerful. And as I'd mentioned before, they also get access to the extra stratagem, the extra warlord trait, and the extra relic. So it further pushes the custom seps down in terms of effectiveness, which I don't really like. Now, you can play your own custom faction, and you can select some decent traits to put into your custom faction, and you can win games, and you can have great games, and you can play the army well, totally. The issue I have is there are a few of these that are outright just worse in every way, objectively worse than some of the ones that come from the established tenets. My example. So, the Tau Sept gives you 1. Each time a unit with this tenet is selected to shoot or fight, you can re-roll 1 hit roll or 1 wound roll. So it's a free re-roll every time you shoot or fight shoot or fight, 1 hit, 1 wound. Straight up. And that's half of it, right? The other half is the auras that get expanded. Now, Farside Enclaves has one that's slightly worse than that, but effectively the same. Each time a model with this tenet makes a ranged attack, nope, sorry, that's the wrong part. Each time a unit with this tenet is selected to shoot or fight, you can reroll one wound roll. So Farsight only gives you the wound reroll possibility. That's fine. It's every time you shoot or fight. Now, Farsight Enclaves, again, has access to unique relics, warlord traits, and a particularly devastating stratagem. And Tau as well. Now, if we get to the custom army septs, there's one here that seems very similar to those two I just read to you, but is just worse in every way. Each time a unit with this tenet is selected to shoot, so there's no fighting in there, you can re-roll one wound roll. So that to hit roll, that's gone. Fight, that's gone. Melee, gone. I get it, Tower not great in melee. They're a little better now. And getting a reroll every time you fight in melee could change things, depending on the units you take as well. So this is what bothers me, is that there's one in the custom section that is just straight up worse than the ones in the pre-established army sets. And that kind of bothers me, because it's dissuading me from playing my own army, because this is shittier. I don't know why they couldn't have it be just like the Farsight Enclaves one. Each time you shoot or fight. Why? I don't see that being overpowered when combined with any of these other ones. That doesn't make sense to me. But there was a conscious decision to take away the idea of each time you shoot or fight, you get that wound reroll. And that I don't like. I don't like that. So, can you make a decent army that uses custom sept rules? Totally. Totally. The power of this army is really in a lot of the stat sheets, in a lot of the unit stat sheets. They're very good. They're very, very good. And one of the reasons I do ultimately like this book, I realize I just ripped on it for a few reasons, but one of the reasons I do really like this book is virtually every unit is usable and solid in its own right, depending on what you want to do. Yeah, some are more powerful than others. There's no complete balance, but there's a semblance of balance, and that's what I really appreciate. There are a variety of different units that you can pick depending on your play style, your sept tenets, your whatever, that can make the game work for you and that can win you games. So a few of the standout units, and this will be obvious if you've played with the Tau since the Codex has come out, or you've seen a few battle reports, is the crisis suits. They are just so very good at just about anything. There's so many rules surrounding them, special stratagems surrounding them, options to deep strike, come in turn one, weapon variety is wonderful, survivability is great. They're just an all-around solid unit. But you could build an army with no crisis suits at all, and you could still have a great game, and you could still have an excellent chance of winning. I'm looking through the stat sheets right now. The troops, they're all solid. Strike teams, good. New updated pulse rifles, excellent. Breacher teams, kind of got, like, they didn't really get much of an upgrade. Their weapon kind of changed and shifted based on the ranges, but that's fine. They're still very good. Very, very good. The Kroot became usable. Now, unfortunately, the auxiliaries, so the Kroot and the Vespid, don't get a lot of the benefits that your army does get. This is one of the things they've kept around. There are ways to mitigate that. The Dalith Sept, for example, is one of them. But they are cheap. That's what I'll say. They're very, very cheap. I played a game with Kroot Hounds, and man, they did a job. It was 4 Kroot Hounds. It's 24 points. It was nothing. I needed to charge something and just keep it locked up. Something that was terrible in combat. And it worked. It did the job. I didn't need marker lights. I didn't need sept tenets for it. I just needed the dogs to be dogs. That was it. So that's fine. A unit of Kroot is incredibly cheap, and they went up in just power and delivery. They now just have better strength as a stat. They gained a minus to the AP and melee. They gained more attacks. They gain more benefits from being around a shaper. They've got benefits if you take Kroot to not take other force organization slots when selecting your army. They gave a lot of little benefits to make the Kroot a little more savory when trying to pick. And the Vespid as well. Now the Vespid have fewer of those benefits because it's only one unit. It's only a fast attack unit called Vespid. They still call them Stingwings. Yeah. So those basically got a strength upgrade. Their melee attacks now do have a minus to them, and the neutron blaster they're equipped with is flat out better and a pretty scary weapon, to be honest. They get 2 shots, strength 5, AP minus 3, 2 damage. And they're all equipped with this gun. So that's pretty cool. They can deep strike as well. So you drop in and pew, 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 shoot something. And as far as I know, they're not very expensive either. Let me just double check. I don't remember their cost. Yeah, they're 12 points a model. I believe they used to be 14. So pretty good. Again, if you had, several small units of Vespids come in and harass, I think that'd be really good. So if they're 12 points each, and the squad has to be 5 models minimum, so there's 60 points per squad. Not bad. Not bad at all. Broadsides are just absolute beasts. The Riptide is still good. Hammerheads, and this is one that I really wanted to try out, and I took it out for a spin my first game, the Sky Ray. Because the Sky Ray last time was so bad. It had a finite number of shots that you needed to have marker lights on because you needed 2 marker lights for seeker missiles to actually function off ballistic skill. It was dumb. It was just dumb. Now, they've got a seeker missile rack, which is just, it's a D3 plus 1 shots. So it's a minimum of 2 shots. You can get 4, and it never runs out of ammo. Great. Also, seeker missiles are better, and they don't require marker lights to be on them. Wonderful. That on its own is great. That also means that anything that can take seeker missiles is getting a solid benefit now. Yeah, they're strength 9 now, which is a huge deal in 9th edition. Strength 9 is massive. It's stuff, most heavy, beastly, big, dangerous things have toughness 8. So having strength 9 is nice. Really loved the Sky Ray. And this is what I mean. Like, I could take a Sky Ray, I could take a Hammerhead, I could take a Riptide, I could take a Broadside, all that stuff from the heavy support section, and they're all good. They're all good. The Sky Ray is pretty cheap for what it is. It's standard tank durability, but it's got a fair few bit more wounds. So it's got 14 wounds, which is nice. But yeah, standard tank durability, so toughness 7, 3-up armor save. No invuln to speak of. But a few things to note about this guy. It comes equipped with 2 marker lights, which are important. It's got the seeker missile rack, so no more finite ammo. And it's got a few small inbuilt rules that just make it more reliable. For one, it's got something called aerial scanners, excuse me. If you target aircraft, so specifically aircraft, I know that's very particular, but if you get to target aircraft, you can add 2 to the hit roll, which is nice, and you re-roll the damage roll. Cool. So there's a nice little bonus to it being an anti-aircraft vehicle. But if you're targeting stuff on the ground, you get your standard ballistic skill with the standard weapons, which are good anyways. So you're not penalized for not shooting aircraft. which is good. And then you've also got a targeting array. The Hammerhead also gets this, which just allows you to re-roll one hit roll when you resolve attacks, which is great. Just a free re-roll to hit built into this tank. Wonderful. It did get a slight downgrade, as did the Hammerhead with its ballistic skill 4, but you get a free reroll now, and marker lights can change this for you. So, not a big deal. I think the Skyray is a wonderful, wonderful choice because you get a lot in a relatively cheap package. Solid damage output, solid durability, you get marker lights, and a little bit of reliability with that reroll too. So overall, things look very, very solid in the Codex. I haven't given much thought to the fortifications because I never really did. They kind of seemed like a gimmicky release when they were released back at, end of 7th? I don't remember. Yeah, they seemed really, really gimmicky and then haven't really been given much love since, so I kind of just don't know. I don't see myself using any of that fortification stuff. But otherwise, everything looks really, 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 really good. The big boy, the Storm Surge, is quite cheap point-wise, but also have to take into consideration that when you're taking a Storm Surge, it's a Lord of War, which means you're going to have to spend the 3 command points to simply bring that Lord of War detachment. So the cost is there. It's cheap in points, but then it'll cost you 3 CP as well. And this is, in my opinion at least, a very CP-heavy book. A lot of the stratagems are great. Very, very fun stuff. Lots of stuff that's specific to certain units. Lots of stuff that's not as specific. Lots of stuff you're going to use. I guarantee it. There's a lot of cool stuff to buff up fire warriors. There's a lot of cool stuff to buff up your battle suits, to protect your battle suits. A lot of stuff you may remember from the previous Codex in a different incarnation. A lot of cool stuff. A lot of cool stratagems. Really, really interesting stuff. What I like about this book overall is there are very few duds and there are very few pick-me auto-include units. There's a lot of internal balance, which I really, really like. It means that people will be able to play the army that they want to play. This obviously is not necessarily going to be the case for like tournament scene or hyper competitive play, but for your average game of 40k against your buddy, or your average game, you take your army to the local gaming store and play there. For your average game, you're going to be able to pick from a wide variety of options and have a very good chance of winning, depending on what you choose. One last thing I'll talk about is the Philosophies of War. There are 2 of them. You get 1 each time you play the game. So they are Mont'ka and Kauyon. Mont'ka will affect your army during turns 1, 2, 3. Kauyon will affect your army during turns 3, 4, 5. They each give different things, but basically Mont'ka is the more aggressive option, which needs you to be a little closer to your enemies to get the benefits, whereas Kauyon is the more wait and survive kind of strategy, which really, really buffs your stuff in the later turns of the game. And I think both of these are good. I've seen a few people talk about them, or when making lists talk about them, saying that Mont'ka is the one you have to choose and that Kauyon sucks, and I'm not really a fan of that mindset. There's the sort of idea that because it affects turns 1, 2, 3, that Mont'ka is the way to go. You have to do that because nothing's going to be there after turn 3, and that's really, man, that happens sometimes, but not a lot. At least not in my experience. So this sort of idea that you got to take this because you got to alpha strike, you got to do it as fast as possible, You shouldn't wait around. You're not going to have anything by turn 5. You're going to have less, certainly. But I have played games where I've used Kauyon, which is turns 3, 4, 5, and I've had great success with it. So both are applicable. I don't think one's better than the other. I don't. I think they're equally good, and it's all going to come down to your army composition and your playstyle. And that'll let you decide which one of these you really want to use. So with that, I think I'll wrap it up. I will be going through, points, units, stratagems, all that other stuff in some separate videos. But for now, thanks for watching.